It is said that the first faith of the Maker belongs to Andraste, and you may call this chantry's real belief solely Andrastian. With Andraste's death in -170 Ancient, the chantry was created more than 70 years later, culminating the ages. The chant is a song of our own histories, sometimes conflicting, sometimes imagined. It is political, spiritual, personal, visionary. Yeah, I get it. The Maker is a spiritual experience, blah blah blah. Let's just cut to the chase. You and I both know that Dragon Age Chantry is a major problem throughout Thedosian history, and here's why. Andraste's identity. Andraste is frequently discussed in Dragon Age lore. There's even a 20-page entry dedicated to the chant in World of Thedas Volume 2. However, not much of her identity is accurately preserved. For example, the Chant of Light in Orlais and the Tevinter Imperium have quite different perspectives on Andraste. According to Dorian,
"It's not my field of expertise, but the Imperium believes Andraste was a mortal woman, a mage. Down south they say, no, she's the bride of the Maker, ascended to his side, divine provenance, blah blah blah."
So let's go through some of these statements again. Most players, including you and me, learned of the Chantry's teachings about Andraste, usually from the south. So here's the truth regarding the life of this prophet. The prophet Andraste is born in Ferelden. The exact year of her birth, though, is hotly contested by scholars. Many historians assume that she was born in the year of -203 Ancient, which was also the year the archdemon Dumont was slain, ending the First Blight. The other academics argued that because she was of Alamari descent, her real origin was from southern Thedas, particularly Ferelden. Scholars determined that her birthplace was near Denerim, hence Denerim is known and recognized as Andraste's birthplace. I also want to point out that, like another person I'll discuss in a moment who parallels to this, might be the result of a lack of maintaining history intact throughout Thedas. After all, if we calculated the time from her birth to Dragon Age, it would be nearly about 1,000 years. Moving on, because her story is quite long, let's skip to the imagery of Andraste. The Tevinter Imperium claims Andraste is a mage, while the South heavily disagrees with this and claims her to be a warrior with no magical component. It's quite clear that Andraste could be a mage due to the oppression of mages in the south with the Circle. However, claiming someone is a mage while the other is not leads us to believe that the Chantry has a huge problem, erasing her potential identity as a mage. Not surprising, but it leads us to all believe that the Southern Chantry is really up to no good. To continue with the imagery of Andraste, she is clearly closely linked with the two historical figures known as Jesus and Joan of Arc. I would primarily say her story is literally the historical story of Joan of Arc rather than Jesus, but I digress. When it came to her slavery, it was all well recorded across the South and even in the Imperium. According to the Southern Chant, Andraste has spent her childhood as a slave and escapes and becomes a wife of a general, who we know as Mafarath. Although this narrative seems triumphant, it's actually not the true story. In truth, Mafarath, already wedlocked with Andraste, was the one who freed her from her slavery. Andraste's father, Eldorath, was killed when soldiers and mages seized an Alamari settlement to the ground, and following her father's death, the land was descended upon Andraste and Mafarath. However, the Tevinters seized over the region, killing individuals who refused to submit to their threats. They seized Andraste and burned the town to the ground. However, because the region was largely made out of Eldorath supporters, most sided with Andraste rather than Mafarath. He would command the war against Tevinter if he could only arrange Andraste's release from the Tevinter slavers who actually had her. As a result, Mafarath is the one who actually frees Andraste from full servitude of Tevin slavery. So was Tevinter truly to blame? Or was it the desire for power that corrupted all of these figures? Mafarath, for example, betrays his own wife and family by collaborating with Archon Hessarian, and even with Andraste, her liberty and even confidence throughout the Maker's existence may have taken her too far away from the human cause that she began against Tevinter. And with her crucifixion in Minrathous, she is burnt on a pyre. Archon Hessarian took pity upon her, ending the final blow to his blade, taking her pain out of misery. With this, the Andrastian faith was born, and the Maker's call had come upon many, expanding his faith upon the people. So maybe the Imperium were the evil people. After all, Tevinter was responsible for the deliverance of a seemingly innocent cause. And this remorse lingered for a long time throughout the ages of Thedas, spawning two Chantries and two Thedosian divines. The Chantry, Imperial versus Orlesian. The Chantry was one of the many cults that emerged from the account of Andraste's martyrdom. The cult of the Maker had no central leadership and his devotees were persecuted mainly. Clerics had to use ciphers and encoded scrolls to keep their knowledge hidden from the Tevinter Magisters. Cult practitioners incorporated Andraste's teachings into the hymns and -130 Ancient, resulting in the Chant of Light, which expanded in popularity. As stated before, the Chantry was split in two. The Southern Chantry was formalized by the Orlesian Emperor Cordelius Dracon in -3 Ancient. They set up a divine 4 years later, known as Divine Justinia I. Though her nomination angered Tevinter, who had been organizing Andrastianism long before Orlais had begun their campaign, they believed that their country to be the Holy Land, as Andraste had lived and died there. They originally sought to pacify the newly formed Orlesian Chantry by moving control over the faith to the Archon, to the great clerics. And the divines are known as the head of the Chantry, like a pope is the head for Catholicism. However, the Orlesian Chantry and their divine was not happy with Tevinter's progress in Andrastianism. The Grand Clerics of Tevinter repeatedly petitioned their recognition to the Orlesian Chantry and were refused on the grounds that the Imperial Chantry admitted men into the priesthood. But the Orlesians were still not satisfied. Following the Third Blight, the Chantry in Orlais fostered the legend that it was the ancient magisters of Tevinter's heresy that delivered the blights to the earth. Because of this rumor, anti-Tevinter and anti-mage sentiment grew along with divide between the two powerful nations. It was ultimately the interpretation of the Maker's second commandment: magic must serve man, not rule over him, and that split the Imperial and Orlesian Chantries. The Defenders claimed that the commandment only meant that magic should not be used to control the minds of others. They said the best way for magic to serve man was to serve as rulers of man. But the Tevinter's clerics changed the Chant of Light to reflect this interpretation of the commandment. And the divine in Val-Royeul, Divine Joyous II, proclaimed them all as heretics, prompting the Archon to nominate their own divine, Grand Cleric Valhael, a man and circle mage. With Tevinter's rebellion, the chant's belief was now split in two. This is a huge problem in Thedas, because now two groups centered on Andrastianism had been formed and had very different imagery of the Maker and even Andraste as a whole. As a result, they are referred to as the White Chantry and the Black Chantry within Thedas. The Maker's identity. The Maker is a supreme being, if not the supreme being, a god who sat on the throne of the Golden City, a creator who bestowed gifts upon spirits and man alike. This Maker, as we understand, was not given the name until the emergence of the Chantry. To be honest, following the formation of the Vale, most of the inhabitants of Thedas were seeking for an explanation. Of course, some knew the Vale's creation like the Elven did, but primarily the Narrominians who voyaged to Thedas needed an answer. We would expect the Evaneris to be the closest to the Maker, yet we know that the Evaneris were simply just great mages who couldn't make things out of thin air like the Maker is described to. So let's start at the beginning, which is a problem. We truly don't know the beginning. The universe began as nothing much like the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, with the Maker having only the green waters of the Fade. Nevertheless, everything was formed by the Maker's word. There was no word for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out the first word. So, in most circumstances, we would like to see if the Maker existed. So how would this religion redeem itself to be true? For one thing, we know that the Elven pantheon is actually genuine. As for the Maker, however, I feel that this is Dragon Age's problem. A god who refuses to redeem himself and we know little of. The only time we were privy to this action was with Andraste and her dedicated followers. So here we are, abandoned in the dust of a god who barely knows his people. He observes and somehow knows what's to come, but for the time being, this god is not a redeemer of his world. For all we know, this all falls into so many theories, so many beliefs, and so many codices surrounding the Maker. However, he has no identity, so he's surely not a Titan, he's surely not Solus, and he's certainly not Sandal. The issue with the Maker is that his identity is as enigmatic as the Void itself. Despite this, we deny his activity in every mission in the Dragon Age series thus far. The best example of this was in Inquisition. The Maker's identity is a problem in itself, and with it leads to many dangerous acts, such as the political aspect. To briefly put this in a manner that doesn't anger me so much, mainly because Andrastianism reflects Catholicism and even Christianity itself, the Chantry does involve itself in politics within Thedas, whether races within the world agree with them or not. Because of this, it has led to many harsh realities of either liberating a nation or to oppress an ideal upon others. Specifically, the Orlesian Emperor Cordelius Dracon, with the help of the Chantry and even the First Inquisition, created the Navarran Accord. The Navarran Accord was signed in 120 Divine, and the Inquisition pledged to lay down its banner and surrender to the authority of the Chantry. The Mage Hunters shifted their concentration from hunting to defending mages, and the Templar Order was established as the wardens for the newly formed Circle of Magi. Senior members of the Inquisition became Seekers of Truth, Templar Overseers, and Divine Special Agents. It is evident that believing in this accord could bring within good intentions for magic. However, the primary bias of thinking magic was evil in Orlais could never become undone. Orlais and the Chantry saw the mages as useful tools to have, like the threat of the Blight, but kept them locked in these circles, creating hostility between non-mages and mages, thus creating a political outcome of a new reality for Southern Thedas. Mages are and always will be inherently dangerous and must be kept in check. Of course, there are many other political aspects that I could mention, for instance like the Exalted Marches that was thrown into the Dales. As for the Imperial Chantry, however, much is contrasted for mages. While Circle Mages exist, they are not primarily locked up, and are relatively used like universities for magic. This allowed the Magisters to reclaim their ancient authority and once again rule the Imperium. And while we still know little about the Black Chantry, I am confident we will learn more about them in Dragon Age Dreadwolf and even in Dragon Age Absolution. But with that, we are going to wrap up. You and I know a little more about the Chantry, and it has a major problem. What are your opinions on Andrastianism, and does your character believe in it? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you don't comment... Hold up, is that Solus?